This is an argument for something. It's an argument for there being a paradigm shift. It's an argument for there being a paradigm shift based on one idea, which is basically the motion through the sun, through space, and around the galaxy. That's it. So if that really is happening, what are we going to see? Because it's not just about disaster. It's not just about the space weather events. It's not just about those aspects of it. When Copernicus discovered that the heliocentric model explained the motion of the planets better than the geocentric one, he set into motion something which fundamentally changed the political power structure of the world at that time in a fundamental way within 150 years. And what I think is happening is that this viewpoint, this dilation of awareness, is going to change the way we view, or it's not even going to change the way we view the universe, it's going to change society. So this is a new paradigm. And to do that, again, it's a shift. We talked about the Mayan calendar, we talked about astronomy. This is about ideas. It's more like the social one. So, ideas, thinkers that have thought about this and, have come up with ideas. Well, there's an amazing philosopher, his name's Teilhard de Chardin, he was actually a Jesuit priest, and he was really he was fascinated by effectively the growth of consciousness on this planet. And the thing that he was really feeling was that evolution is coming to a point. That evolution isn't a random process that was let loose by a kind of random molecular kind of soup being hit by lightning and life being created and then running its own story. Somehow, we're heading towards a culminating point of evolution. And he viewed this as the omega point. And this is another idea that's paralleled by the work of Terence McKenna, who had his time wave zero theory. I won't go too deeply into that in a moment, but the omega point was something that Terence embraced too. It's the idea of there being a moment in time which basically we're moving towards that is a defining thing. It's not like the universe was set into motion with a big bang and is running down towards some sort of entropic heat death through the second law of thermodynamics. This idea is that we're in a process that's heading somewhere, that it's coming to a culmination, that there will be a point. Now, Teilhard de Chardin did not say that this was going to happen at 11:11 in the morning on December 21st, 2012. But he said it was going to happen. And that actually it's like an inevitable thing, because what's really interesting about his philosophy is that he got chaos theory before chaos theory was really existing. He said, complex systems become more complex, they do not then become simple. So, if you get complex systems that are becoming more and more complex, there comes a point at which there is some sort of completion. So he had another idea, which is one of the key ideas of this kind of this worldview and this viewpoint, and that's the idea of the noosphere. So the noosphere is you can visualize it's like the thinking layer of the planet. And it's like the biosphere, or the lithosphere, which is like the mineral sphere, but it's like the intellectual or ideational sphere of the planet. And his idea about this was that humanity, us monkeys running around on the surface doing all this crazy stuff, are effectively just emerging into awareness that what they are aspects of the thinking layer of the planet. But human consciousness in and of itself isn't something which originates with some sort of monkey-based thing. It's that monkeys are actually a planet thing. We're actually an aspect of the planet, and our great kind of fall from this understanding of where we are is characterized by the fact that actually we've lost touch with that, and the noosphere and the emergence of the noosphere is basically human consciousness becoming aware that it's inseparable from the earth. And in fact, that what we think of as ideas in our brain is actually an electromagnetic phenomenon that's generated by our relationship with the sun and the earth. So it's an integrated and holistic worldview. And I think that's a really prescient thing, that he understood that that there was, it's holistic thinking at a very early stage of the 20th century, and it's one which is visionary with the point of view of there being embraces chaos theory, embraces a lot of things that were later discovered. So I would suggest that like he's one of the the philosophers that can give us some thinking tools for like how we can actually like think about this, because it's the idea of the galaxy. It's like to make that compelling, you kind of like have to kind of articulate in different ways and different aspects. And if it is a paradigm shift, then it's going to stand up to this, because what happens when a paradigm shifts is that incommensurability, everything moves, all the belief systems change. So this is another idea about there kind of being like a strange attractor or some sort of process in time that we're moving towards and through. And it comes from the work of Peter Russell. It's not super clear on this projection, but basically he talks about spiral time. So instead of like the Big Bang, like ejecting like the universe into existence and everything just kind of goes on until it runs out of energy, which is basically how modern physics sees the universe. That in his view, there's a white hole in time. We're moving towards an omega point. We're moving towards a point in time where spiral that we've seen that is the motion of our planet around the galaxy turns in on itself to a point where it's tight enough that it basically forms some sort of implosion. So he talks about the beginning being the infinite radius of the evolutionary spiral, which is his idea of the beginning. And then it comes into existence through matter, through cells, through complex animals, and then mammals, and then primates and monkeys, and then the awareness of the new sphere, and effectively at some point all of this gains a kind of critical momentum, and we pass through all of this in some other worldview. Ways to think about paradigm shift. One of the really key ones is that in terms of where we invest our energy, what kind of change is this? Well, it's systemic. What's happening is a systemic change. It's not incremental. It's not little pieces on top of the old system. So, looking at like, I used the banking crisis as a good example of incrementalism. So you have a fundamentally collapsing system. What do we do? Well, we try and prop it up by incrementalism. So the banking system isn't working. We know it's not working. It's based on a ridiculous principle that cannot work. Compound interest basically means that at some point an infinite amount of money needs to be created in order to service debt. Basically, the problem with incremental thinking is that it's attempting to solve a problem at its own level. Einstein made this point that you cannot solve a problem from its own level of thinking. You need to go beyond the level of the problem itself. So what we're doing is we're funneling huge amounts of money into the problem of banks. The banks are basically like hugely benefiting from it at the expense of the real economy. Because no one's like thinking systemically, i.e. we change money, well, we avoid banking collapse. We're looking at the difference between systemic and incremental change. So systemic would be, okay, the system isn't working, the money system isn't working, we need a new system. Incrementalism is like, well, let's keep going and hope for the best, and we'll keep doing the same thing, but we'll add on a little bit more energy. And the fundamental principle of paradigm shift is that it's not just about the astronomy, it's not just about one calendar, it's science changes, culture changes. We see a profound effect on the political and social level. So, what's the social model of paradigm shift going to look like? And this is Irvin Maslow. He's been around for a while. He wrote Chaos Point. He's kind of like he was a social research person that got really interested in chaos theory. He got really interested in a lot of these ideas. He wrote this book, World Shift 2012, which is really about like kind of the green economy and consciousness. And he really broke it down into something simple, like you can just talk about it with anybody. And it's like so there's a cultural paradigm shift happening. Paradigm shift is between logos culture and holos culture. And he defined logos. He said, look, the last 2,000 years have really been based on rationality, the rational mind, the thinking process. It's defined by the Greek and Roman traditions of philosophy. This is where the idea of rational mind actually came from. And then it reached its height in the philosophy of Descartes. And they had this idea, I think, therefore I am. The problem with that is that it divides the universe into two fundamental divisions. There's mind and there's matter. Or you could say, if we don't mind, it doesn't matter. And the problem is that if we view the world that way, the world is a resource. It's there to be traded, bought and sold and used as we want. Because it's just matter, it doesn't matter. We're money, we're somehow in a superior relationship to that. And that idea, that belief system has dominated the intellectual life of this culture for the last 2,000 years. Now, you contrast that with holistic culture, and this is the same as holistic medicine and whole foods. It just means whole. That's it. Logos effectively means like logic or the word or thought. And holos is defined basically as a fundamental balance within this world. So mind and matter aren't two different things. They're one aspect of one thing that needs to be balanced. So we balance the mind, we balance the body. And holistic culture re-establishes nature as being important, sentient, and with rights. So it's not something that you just take it out and just chop it down, build soil, farms, sort of like Americans with beef birds. It's not something that can be exploited. It's not just a quantity. It has qualities. It's sentient. It has rights. So, one of the key belief systems about this is that the holistic culture views the world as a living being. We call it the giant hypothesis. Or it's actually a more radical version of that. And the interesting thing about this is that holistic culture is much more widely spread than perhaps even most people realise. By the social research that's been done, it's approximately 30% of the US adult population, which is very kind of like split there. It's like, there's a very kind of, there's an emergent culture, and then there's the culture which is heavily embedded with but the balance is tipping, and more emerging holistic culture is happening. So it's just identifying with that culture, and most people know about that. So it's in terms of its social application, these ideas, this is the direction we're moving in. And if we invest in systemic change rather than incrementalism, problem things up, then we're going in the furthest. So the organising principles of the new paradigm, all they have in common is they're all basically like reflecting nature. And nature is fractal in its organisation principles. So what you find with fractals is the key thing about fractal is that they're scalable. So you can take principle of resonance and say, I've got individual resonance, I resonate, and then there's resonance with other people, and there are planetary resonances as well. And coherence is another idea. A coherent field of energy. You can measure that electromagnetically in people, and then you can measure it in groups as well. And there's planetary coherence. But contrasting this with another idea, and it's kind of like we're getting into like it's just an example. It's kind of exploring this and going into more depth. Talking about incrementalism, systemic change, and ideas that are kind of still part of like the contemporary kind of ecological movement. Sustainability versus resilience is the one I'm focusing on at the moment. And you hear a lot of talk about sustainability, and it's become like a real kind of like flag waved by the green community. But actually, if you really scratch the surface with sustainability, it's become kind of greenwash term, which basically doesn't really mean that much, because people, big corporations talk about sustainable growth. You can go to an oil company and they'll tell you, they're looking at sustainable growth. Because, that's their view. If they're growing, it's going to be more sustainable. It's incrementalism. We're sustainable because we're polluting 10% less this year. That's the definition. Sustainable tourism. Well, tourism isn't sustainable. So, it's incrementalism again. It's sustainable development. Well, again, that just means that we're less damaging than we were last year. The key things about those principles is that they're not human-centered. You don't really talk about what a sustainable forest is like. In nature, it's all kind of given. But if you look at resilience is a fractal scale principle. Because you talk about individual resilience. It's something which basically is something that